I recently got back from Geneva and I got to have a look at some of the new models that were released, and I'm going to share some of those new models with you today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Roman Sharf. I'm the CEO of Luxury Bazaar, and I've been a watch dealer over 20 years. So stay with me while I show you a little bit of behind the scenes of what's going on in regards to new models that were shown at Geneva Watch Days. Now, if you're not a subscriber to this channel, I will ask you to hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into the watches. Now, Geneva Watch Days is open to the public. Only one day is press only. I think it's Thursday, or really the day before the show starts. And unlike Watches and Wonders, this show, there's no tickets to buy. It's very decentralized and very, very relaxed. Now, I'm still processing the multitude of new watches that I saw there, but here are just a few that caught my eye, and hopefully will catch yours. I'm going to start off with Moser and Studio Underdog collab. Now, Studio Underdog is known for making quirky little watches. They sell anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. The idea behind the brand, which was started during COVID by a young gentleman who overheard somewhere a story that, some snobby and snooty collectors were complaining about the fact that the size of a watch was changed by 34 millimeters. And he thought to himself, you know what? Watches should be fun. Watch collecting should be fun. And he did exactly that. Now, if you look at our website, you'll notice watches like the pizza watch, right? You'll notice a lot of funky color, a lot of pops of color. And this is exactly what we get. So what we got here is a set. We got an Underdog Studio watch alongside with a Moser Perpetual, dubbed the Passion Fruit. It's pretty obvious why it's called the Passion Fruit due to the color palette on the watch itself. Of course, Moser I've always dubbed Moser to be an easy entry into the world of independent watchmaking because, their pricing starts at $15,000 and they can get up there into the six-figure range, obviously, but majority of the stuff is under $100,000. So the Duo was priced at $65,000 and a lot of people were complaining about the price, and I said, hold on a second, you're getting a perpetual calendar from Moser and a chronograph from Studio Underdog done together, and I think $65,000 was actually quite reasonable. Honestly, I saw these things in person and I was impressed. I really was impressed. And don't underestimate the chronograph. This is a single button chronograph from Underdog, so again, not exactly an uncomplicated timepiece. Next, we're going to talk about Breitling's first perpetual calendar chronograph. So Breitling decided to step it up a little bit. Again, it is their 140th anniversary, and what better way to step things up by making a complicated timepiece. I've talked about this numerous times before. A chronograph in itself is a complication, if that makes sense, right? It's complicated to make a chronograph. A chronograph complications will have the watch lose amplitude almost instantly. To make a good chronograph, it does take time, research and development, and master watchmakers. Now, to add a perpetual calendar on top of that, the combination of two makes it a grand complication. Patek considers their regular annual and perpetual calendars grand complications. So you get into the combination of chronograph perpetual, it really is complicated. The only other step up is to add a tourbillon or a minute repeater into the mix. If you look at the pictures, what they did is they took the Datura, they took the Navitimer, they took the Chronomat, or the Super Chronomat as they dubbed it, their flagship models, and they put the complications in there. What I love about this, first of all, I love the choice of rose gold, and I love the fact that it's not dominant. Maybe on a Navitimer a little bit due to the color of the dial, but on the rest of the pieces it's not very dominant, meaning that generally you're seeing a black watch, which sticks with that military aviation sporty look overall. And even on a Navitimer with the dial being rose, it's still not very overwhelming because what they did is they did a good job keeping the subdials the same color as they did on the black versions, right? And look, there's a lot of things to discuss here in terms of designs, the straps, the way the pushers are done, the way the case has been redone. They really took their time, and rightfully so. For your 140th anniversary, you want to come out with a bang. Now, the issue with Breitling is obviously these pieces are expensive. I don't have the exact retails on them, but it is going to be obvious that a perpetual calendar chronograph is going to be expensive. Is it going to be in the realm of Patek Philippe? Probably not, but it's going to be up there. And the minute Breitling gets into an expensive price range, it gets a bit tricky. It's going to really take a die-hard Breitling fan to go out there and spend the kind of money these pieces are going to cost to appreciate the horology, because collector starts to wonder, well, what else can I get for this money? Or what other brand could I go to for this type of money? Because historically, you look at an expensive Breitling, specifically precious metal Breitlings, they don't tend to hold their value really well. So as I said, it's going to take a die-hard collector to get out there and pick one of these up. If I had to pick one, I'm going with the Navitimer, because the Navitimer has always kind of been my favorite from Breitling. Next, we're going to talk about the continuation of the Daniel Roth rebirth. So during Watches and Wonders, they came out with a remake of his original tourbillon. They announced that they're going to make 50 of them maximum, and they came out with 20 examples earlier in yellow gold. What I love is they kept it original to the specs. This is how you would get the OG Daniel Roth tourbillon in terms of size. And this time what they did is they continued on with a different metal. So now they did 20 more in rose gold. And this time I think the only difference was with the pinstripe gouache dial texture versus the yellow gold. And these are going to be numbers starting from 21. Again, picking up off the first 20. Again, they announced they're going to make 50 in total. They did 20 in yellow gold. They did 20 in rose gold. And because there's only 10 left, my guess is going to be that one is going to be in platinum. Again, list price 155,000 Swiss francs. Not cheap, but there's a line to get them. They are probably all sold out before they even hit the markets. They're calling it tourbillon subscription. I guess that's a fancy French word for subscription. And so anybody who's anybody is going to get one of those watches, going to go on the risk of those that they know are not going to resell it, but rather show it off, enjoy it for years to come and pass it on to the next generation. Try to find an original one of these in platinum. There's no number you can pay because whoever has it won't sell it. And people are willing to pay big dollars for those. Where not so long ago, at least in the middle of my career, I couldn't give these things away because this is what happens when a company gets bought over. More often than none, it gets ruined. And it's very unfortunate, but I'm just happy that both of these brands are now in the hands of LVMH. In fact, I'm ecstatic about it because they're going to continue the Daniel Roth traditions and keep his name alive. It's a great name in the industry alongside with Gerald Genta. Next, we're going to talk about Jacob & Co. Just released a new Bugatti piece. You saw me wearing that piece at Watches and Wonders. I am the guy that's proud to say I was second to get that watch on my wrist after Jay-Z. Of course, I tend to think that Jay-Z might be a little bit bigger deal than I am. It was actually inspired by when Jacob and I believe his son Benjamin went to the Bugatti factory and they had a place in there for display purposes where an entire Bugatti was kind of like taken apart piece by piece. It was sort of like a real life diagram and every single piece was floating in the air. You see similar things done with watches in some of the boutiques. Langenzonen does that really, really well when you walk into their boutiques, right? But the idea behind the Bugatti watch, when people ask me what was great about it, I said the fact that they slimmed it down in size. It's a lot more wearable for somebody with a smaller wrist, and there were no diamonds on it because diamonds are not for everyone. And you know what, to be fair, that all crystal automation of the engine in the middle, it looks like a lot of diamonds shining in the middle of the watch to begin with, right? But we're not here to talk about the Bugatti watch, we're here to talk about the new oil pump. This celebrates the 5th anniversary since the original oil pump came out back in 2019. This is a re-envisioned version of the pump, and this really is a good example of how companies keep up with the markets. They know what the market wants, they know what the market needs, and what did they do? Again, they toned it down in size. Original version was almost 50 millimeters. This one is 44 millimeters. Now, Jacob, you may say 44 still sounds like a big watch. Well, you need room to fit all those beautiful automations, right? For the oil pump to get going, obviously you need the movement to keep it going and so on and so forth. So you actually need real estate. So it's a bit of a challenge. The reason some of the original watches came out and they were bigger because it was easier to make them that way. It was easier to fit all this stuff. The way the lug design, the way the strap design is done, same as with the Bugatti I just talked about, it makes it a lot easier to get away wearing a 44 millimeter watch. Take Richard Mille that measures 48 millimeters from top to bottom, but yet they're ergonomic enough to where you put them on your wrist, they feel like they're a good size, and they actually feel comfortable to wear. 88 pieces, limited edition, $280,000 Swiss francs retail. I'm gonna call this horological art in motion. If you're a fan of mechanical scenery on the watches, I have been. There's something about a moving scene on your watch that is mechanically triggered that syncs to me from an aesthetic perspective and from a horological perspective. It's not easy to execute that. And they did a tremendous job with the first one, and they just refined the second one even better. I think this one will be a great seller for them. Let's move on to Konstantin Chaikin. Konstantin Chaikin was sitting at a cafe, I'm gonna say about a year ago, around the time where Richard Mille announced the thinnest watch in the world, beating out Bulgari. This has been a race going back to the 60s, by the way, who has the thinnest watch. You had Vacheron, you had Piaget, and Richard Mille beat him by by a hair or whatever it was. And Konstantin Chaikin called Richard Mille on the phone and he said, listen, Richard, or Richard, I should say, hold my beer. I'm going to make a watch that's thinner than yours. Now, that story didn't happen. I just made that one up. I don't even know if Konstantin personally knows Richard Mille, but I do know that he now made the thinnest watch in the world, beating out the Ferrari plate, as we dubbed it. And guess what? He made another plate, just a bit thinner. So what is the difference? Richard Mille came in at 1.75 millimeters, and Konstantin Chaikin came in at 1.7 millimeters. So he's a 0.5 millimeter smaller. Imagine that. Him sitting there with a caliper and actually trying to say, all right, just a 0.5 millimeter, just a 0.5 millimeter. I mean, this thing is as thin as a piece of paper, damn near. And we're getting thinner and thinner. I don't know who else out there is going to try and beat that. Maybe Bulgari will take a crack at it again. Maybe Piaget will take a crack at it again. I don't know. But I do know that it is a feat all of its own. We have latest watches. We have thinnest watches. We have smallest watches with a lot of complications. There's a lot of things that you can be put into the books as a record for. And thinnest watch has been one that's been around for a long time, and everybody's been trying to do it. It is very, 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 very difficult because, again, this watch still has to work. What I love most about it is that if you look at Richard Mile's Ferrari, it doesn't really look like the Richard Mile's that we are used to. It's wider. Obviously, the fact that it's thin doesn't make it look like a typical Richard Mille. I wish they did it in the same shape as, let's say, an RM11, where Konstantin Chaikin did it in the old fashion of his wrist monsters, or wrist monsters, as you would call it. If we look at the picture, you'll see that, hey, you have the eyes. Konstantin Chaikin makes up, obviously, the smile. And you know what? The watch is very reminiscent of his original Joker watch, which he made back in 2015, which, by the way, he re-released that watch. And with that, he also downsized the watch. You're starting to see a pattern here. Original Joker, I think, was 42 millimeters. He made one in a 40 millimeter, also with an upgraded movement. Next watch is going to be Bulgari. We're going back to Bulgari, and they introduced some chiming watches. So they came out with 3 ultra-complicated octos chiming watches, created in collaboration with the Italian Swiss conductor Lorenzo Biotti. The trio includes the Octaroma Grande Sonnerie Tourbillon, as well as new takes on the Octaroma Carillon Tourbillon and Octafinissimo Minute Repeater. Now, the Octaroma models include a tritone harmonic interval, also known as the Devil's Interval, due to its haunting sound, a first for the brand. You noticing something here? Ever since LVMH took over, Bulgari is doing big things, and they can't get any bigger than these 3 watches, let me tell you something, because this is a flex. This is a horological flex. This is showing the world saying, hey, we can do this. LVMH is going to become, and has already become, a horological powerhouse. So pay attention to what they come out with across the brands that they own, along with their new Louis Vuitton watches. Lipay came out with lots of big news because Lipay just got bought by LVMH. So we're going to see big things to come. Of course, this was developed prior to him knowing that he's going to get bought out, prior to getting that LVMH money. And this is the Albatross, right? Again, collaboration with MB&F. No surprise there. They do a ton of stuff with Max, and rightfully so, because from a design perspective, Max is one of my favorites. I always call him the modern-day Gerald Genta. And from a mechanics perspective, Arnaud and the team, and by Arnaud, I mean Arnaud, the CEO of Lipay, they're second to none. I got to see this thing in person. He showed me how it all works. What an amazing horological, again, piece of art. This is exactly, I feel about this exactly the same way I feel about watches that have moving scenes on them, like the Jacob Pump we discussed earlier. It's horological art in motion, except this one is a lot bigger. You're not putting it in the wrist. This thing is about this big, about yay high. So this is a striking hour clock. The propellers start to move. They get animated as the clock starts to chime. They chime at the top of the hour and a brief chime in the middle of the hour every 30 minutes. They're only making 40 of these, and they're making them in different colors. So I think there's either 4 or 5 different colors and 40 in total. Retail price is around $140,000, and rightfully so. This thing took quite some time to develop, quite some time to build, and the quality of the build is what really counts. There was another car that they showed that while I was there, where the engine pulls out and it becomes a cigar lighter. If you stay tuned for my full recap of Geneva Watch Days, you will see that footage as well. Laurent Ferrier came up with something that's very subdued, very not in your face, very plain Jane, but that's what Laurent Ferrier is known about, and that's what his followers like to buy his watches for. It's no surprise, every year he drops an annual limited edition called Série Atelier Watch. So I'm assuming boutique only edition. This time it's via the brand new Classic Auto Collection, and the dial is what does it for the watch, right? It's the dial, it's the dial, it's the dial. They dubbed it the Rosy Sandstone dial. Retail price 50,000 Swiss francs. And I'm gonna quote, they say, the beauty of nature and the continuity of time. Okay, it's a copper tone dial. I don't say that because I don't like it, because I actually love this, okay? To me, if you ask me what this is, it's a rose gold dial. Typical Laurent Ferrier, no thrills, no frills, beautiful finishes, well-executed case, crown, And again, it becomes all about the dial. I've always liked Laurent Ferrier. Are they big, huge sellers for us? They're not, due to their very, very small production and a very niche following, but I like what they did here. I love the color of this dial. In fact, I prefer this over the muted colors that we saw in the past. And last but not least, I want to talk about DB DB28XS Aerialate with a gouache meteorite dial. Put that in perspective. How do you make that? Like, meteorite is not exactly the easiest material to work with. It's one of the hardest materials to work with, actually, because the nature of the material, it's really, really hard. And of course, the coloring on the dials in true DB nature, how do you achieve that? That is the watch that left a lot of collectors, dealers, and everybody that saw that watch at that very moment going, how? And that's amazing. If you're able to do that, if you're able to take a watch, hand it to a collector, a dealer, or anybody that's in the watch space, and they look at it, and the first question that comes to their mind after they say, wow, it's a good-looking watch, because I think aesthetically this thing is a knockout. If the second question is how, that's when you know you really, really succeeded. Aesthetics, design, innovation. That's the reason for it. Price, pretty jaw-dropping, $120,000. And people are like, wow, Roman, that's a little bit expensive for a two-hand watch. Well, let's start with the fact that DB is among some of the most expensive brands out there. Two, I don't know how many times or what the error rate is or was on making that particular dial. Their cost of production must have been ridiculous. They don't just say, oh, let me look at the ceiling and say, it looks like 120 grand. It's based on something. It's based on numbers. It's based on R&D costs. It's based on production costs. It's based on error rates. So these numbers they don't pull it out of their asses. There is a method to this madness of coming up with this price. I mean, this thing is this is bonkers. Like, how do you put that pattern on that dial? How do you get that color in the dial? How do you blacken anthracite the way it's blackened in this particular case? Design-wise, they knocked it out of the park. It's a smaller watch. Again, everybody's going smaller because they see this is where the trends are going. By the way, the problem with going smaller or bigger, I've been there and seen that. Like, I've seen what went from smaller to bigger, and those times tend to overlap, and these companies tend to overproduce. So, trends do change. They do go up and down in terms of size. So I told a lot of the guys that I met with, who I have a relationship with, I said, guys, be careful on the small trend not to overproduce, because it's not like they decide something today and it comes out tomorrow. It takes time for the watch to be produced. Sometimes it takes more than a year or two, depending on the amount of research development you're putting into a new model, per se. And sometimes all of a sudden we're back to bigger, and all of a sudden nobody wants the smaller watches. So for independents, it's easier because their production numbers are small. For some of the bigger boys, this sometimes becomes an issue. It was an issue for Bulgari when it bought Gerald Genta and Daniel Roth and made those humongous watches. They overproduced them, and you can find them online for pennies on a dollar. These are some of the few things that I decided to pick to share with you that I guess wowed me from Watches and Wonders. And if you guys want to see me handling some of these watches and more, check out my channel and our Gray Market series, where the video is going to be posted. I had an amazing time in Geneva at Watches and Wonders. It was absolutely wonderful to get in touch and feel and see these new timepieces. But it was even more wonderful to meet a lot of you guys face to face as I was walking around Old Town Geneva. Other than that, you guys know what to do. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.